Hello, my name is Tony. This is a tricky one. The only way I can approach it is to give my own personal take based on the way it struck me when I first saw it and the way it still strikes me now. Right. Looking back, the critical reception at the time was hostile. Funny that. It was a financial failure at the box office. The public didn't exactly swarm in droves to see it. It's listed in Michael Medved and Randy Dreyfuss's 1978 book, The 50 Worst Movies of All Time and How They Got That Way. But for once, Roger Ebert and I seemed to be on the same page. He rated it highly and decreed it a bizarre masterpiece, and I have no choice but to agree because that's exactly what I think it is, a masterpiece. Just galls me to have to concur with an elitist, hypocritical snob in a tutu like Ebert. But what can you do? He had to be right about something occasionally. Why is it tricky then? Well, it's a case of how astonishingly great I think this film is, on a purely emotional and instinctive level. Thus, objectivity is somewhat elusive for me to come by. I even enjoy its flaws, which means balance is likely to be compromised by bias. I might struggle with clarity, but I'm going to give it my best shot and be as fair and even-handed as possible, and leave it to you to draw your own conclusions. As with most of Peckinpah's movies, it's never just a simple case of you either love it or hate it. Okay, it is for some people, I suppose, but for me, it's always more complex than that. I can even find elements of value in Convoy and the Osterman Weekend, for Christ's sake, which ain't easy, let me tell you. The Garcia storyline is an undemanding one, a direct and straightforward framework that requires minimal mental agility to grasp. It's the mad macho meat that Peckinpah hangs on that framework that is a much more intricate, deep and sophisticated substance of deliciously warped and twisted existential chaos. But first, the bare bones. Teresa Janine Maldonado is the pregnant teenage daughter of Mexican crime boss El Jefe Emilio Fernandez. El Jefe wants to know who the dirty dog is who left his baby girl hanging a donut. So, like any dutiful father, he has her tortured until she reveals the culprit is one Alfredo Garcia. Garcia was to be El Jefe's successor, someone he trusted, treated like a son, so he's naturally a little miffed at his betrayal via the deflowering and impregnation of his daughter. He issues a $1 million bounty for whoever brings him the head of Alfredo Garcia. Benny Warren Oates is an ex-US Army officer scraping a living, playing piano and tending bar in a sleazy tourist saloon in Mexico City. He also happens to be a friend of the currently missing Alfredo Garcia. Two jaded hitmen, Sappensley, Robert Webber and Quill Gig Young, visit the bar to grill Benny for info. Benny tells them that although the name Alfredo Garcia is familiar, he can't place the guy and therefore can't help. Later, visiting his girlfriend Elita Isla Vega, Benny is aggrieved when she confesses she had a sexual affair with Alfredo because he professed to love her, something which Benny has neglected to do. She also tells him that Garcia is recently deceased due to a drunk driving accident a week previously. This gives Benny an idea. He goes to the hotel room of Sappensley and Quill, where they're hanging out with Max, El Jefe's associate, who hired the two killers to whack Garcia and retrieve his head. Benny makes a deal to get the head for them for $10,000 on delivery and $200 operating capital, conveniently failing to inform them that Garcia is already dead and Elita knows where he's buried. He persuades Elita to accompany him on a road trip to Garcia's grave, but they're not the only ones on the case, and so begins a violent and nightmarish odyssey into the heart of darkness down Mexico way. Alfredo Garcia is Peckinpah's most personal film, an allegorical and autobiographical manifestation of both his personal life and working life as a filmmaker. Made entirely in Mexico away from Hollywood, it's his giant middle finger to the studios. Benny is a barely disguised Peckinpah alter ego, a fatalistic outsider desperately striving to achieve something within a world expressly designed to put obstacles in his way and frustrate his ambitions. There is so much that exposes Peckinpah's beliefs and attitudes. His inherent mistrust of women is writ large. Benny loves Elita, in some ways idolizes and idealizes her. Yet the incoherence of his emotional vocabulary is a key accessory to her betraying him and sleeping with Garcia. When they are assaulted by two bikers, one of whom is mischievously played by Peckinpah's friend Chris Christopherson, she willingly sacrifices herself to rape in return for Benny's life. She will give herself sexually so that he can live, and their relationship has a chance to continue. A distraction, it gives Benny the upper hand, and he is quick to coldly murder their attackers, but the idea of women using femininity and sex as a weapon and for leverage is indelibly stamped, reinforced in the psychology underpinning Peckinpah's worldview. Benny may love Alita, but trust is harder to come by. In one sense, her actions are practical and selfless. In another, she resorts to them a bit too quickly and willingly for Benny's liking. When they find Alfredo's resting place, Benny's intentions to dig up the corpse of her former lover and decapitate it revolts Alita, but he proceeds nonetheless, only to be knocked unconscious by an unseen attacker. Now Peckinpah plunges us into a darker, almost surreal gothic nightmare as Benny claws his way out of a shallow grave he's been buried in. We're in horror movie territory as he digs Alita out of an identical situation, only to find that he's too late and she is dead. Overwhelmed by grief and anger, Benny is driven by a thirst for revenge and to retrieve the missing head of Alfredo Garcia. He takes off after the attackers. A lot of people are going to die along the way in Peckinpah's signature slow-motion bullet-riddled style, and the ending, when it comes, ain't gonna be a happy one, pilgrims. Warren Oates, rarely a lead actor in pictures, has that nervy, edgy, wired-up, crazy loser chic down to a fine art. He unravels magnificently as he pursues his golden fleece, the severed head of the title. When he ultimately succeeds, delivers said head, he throws it all away to murder El Jefe and his henchmen and set the crime lord's daughter and newborn child free. Redemption? Maybe, but it costs, paid for in his own destruction.
Come on, Al. We're going home.
I see parallels in Peckinpah's combative relationship with Hollywood and the studios, who from very early on in his career interfered with nearly all of his films, trying to cut them into more crowd-pleasing and user-friendly shapes, compromising this director's original visions. This is his journey through hell to reach his goal. Peckinpah maintained that Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia was the closest he came to making the film he wanted to make. The final cut, he insisted, was his. The finished product is progressively nihilistic. Early on in the bar, when Benny asked Gig Young for his name,
I didn't catch your name, mister.
Dobbs. Fred C. Dobbs.
it's the moniker of the Humphrey Bogart character in John Huston's classic The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Bogart's character was driven mad by greed in that movie, by his obsessive and futile search for an elusive treasure. Peckinpah's paranoid conception encompasses many of the same themes, follows the same threads, yet is infinitely darker. As Benny spirals into psychosis during his journey through the searing and filthy Mexican Badlands, he maintains a fractured, rambling, one-sided discourse with the decaying severed head of Alfredo, which resides in a sack on the passenger seat beside him. Flies buzz, the head starts to stink, and Benny's inadequate attempts to preserve it with blocks of ice and running showers are doomed to fail. But he's going to hang on to it until the bitter end, confronting and mechanically gunning down those who get in his way. Literally, everyone who crosses his path is going to die. He remains unrepentant. I've killed people and worse, he says at one point. As he pumps bullets into a corpse of one of the hoods who whacked Alita,
Why? Because it feels so goddamn good.
the role is one that Oates was made for. A career built on character parts provided him with the experience necessary to invest Benny with the complex traits of a consummate anti-hero. Every twitch, every mannerism, the eerie improvised quality of his delivery results in a classic screen performance that is a compelling knockout. You can't knock the supporting cast either. Alita is probably Peckinpah's most sophisticated female character, and along with Teresa, who only appears briefly, provides the film with its human and emotional anchor points. She isn't treated with any great courtesy by the script, but Isla Vega is a good enough actress to make her both believable and sympathetic. A shame we never saw more of her in movies. No, not like that. Behave yourselves. Gig Young and Robert Webber are terrific as the two classy and cruel hitmen who have a propensity to unload hot lead with the best of them. They radiate a sense of urbane lethality, the more socially refined flip sides of Benny's down at heel and psychologically conflicted grifter. either. Conscience, guilt, or moral doubt don't figure in their personalities at all. Although many critics accuse Peckinpah's direction of being messy and unfocused, to me it seems more of a deliberate stylistic choice to accentuate the nightmarish quality of the narrative. Benny swigs tequila almost constantly throughout the runtime, and very often, combined with the obligatory slow-mo carnage and gunplay, the result is like the audience is viewing the action through the languorous gaze of an unstable drunk. Peckinpah's script, co-written with Gordon Dawson, is packed with memorable dialogue and wonderful pulp musings. It has a rare poetic quality, reminiscent of the hard-boiled dialectic associated with Raymond Chandler and Elmore Leonard, only with a more acidic and corrosive overbite. Cinematography by Alex Phillips Jr., a native of Mexico City, is all filthy heat and malevolent shade, so vivid you can almost breathe in the dry air and choke in dust as the sun beats relentlessly down on the arid and unforgiving landscapes. The score by Peckinpah regular Jerry Fielding is again another high-quality work of his. For me, this is Peckinpah stripped bare to his very essence. Weird and perverse romanticism, shattering yet surprisingly almost bloodless violence, alcoholism, misogyny, unsettling morbidity, gruesome subject matter, toxic machismo, and escalating insanity all combine to make it a truly original cinematic experience. Aside from Isla Vega and Janine Maldonado, the two main females, curiously enough, there are no other compassionate characters. The males are all hopelessly corrupt, depraved, or mercenary dicks in one way or another. Benny we will root for because he does at least have some redeeming features. He does care for Elita, genuinely grieves her loss, and does believe that there has to be something more honourable, just and meaningful at the end of this destructive rainbow of blood and death. If he finds that iota of redemption or absolution in saving Teresa and her child by sacrificing his own existence, then so be it. Now the tricky bit, balance. I absolutely love and adore this film, always did and always will, so admitting to recognising certain not so praiseworthy elements is a teeny bit of a problem. However, Peckinpah to some extent objectifies women and categorises them in less than flattering ways. Teresa is carrying Alfredo's child, yet gives him up to her father. In fairness, she is partially stripped, degraded and physically tortured to reveal his name, whilst being heavily pregnant. But still, you know, it's betrayal. I dunno, you do a girl a favour, knock her up, skip town, leave her to the tender mercies of her crime lord daddy, and this is the thanks you get. Rat it out. Geez, good job you're already dead then. Elita is a whore, and that's how she's depicted, not a school teacher or florist, but a prostitute. And she runs off to sleep with Benny's pal Alfredo the moment his back is turned. She's an earthy, salacious hooker. Like, what did you expect? Second nature, yeah? Is still betrayal, though. I dunno, you do a girl a favour, share pubic lice with her, or did she share them with you? Yeah, probably. Don't tell her you love her, and this is the thanks you get. Cheated on. Jeez, good job she doesn't get to live, and you don't get to marry her like you proposed then. Bare female breasts are a bit of an obsession, especially where Isla Vega is concerned. Not that she isn't very nicely endowed, and it's not that I'm complaining, but the amount of time she spends stripped to the waist or partially naked does border on the profligate, and is perhaps a little unnecessary. I mean, really, I'm not complaining, far from it, but some might feel differently. It's rumoured that on set, Vega announced to the crew, "Get used to seeing these," and judging by what's on screen, they probably had every opportunity to do so. The audience certainly does. Then there's the prostitute in the bar who comes on to Hitman Sappensley. She gets poleaxed with an elbow to the face for her pains. I get the impression this scene amused Peckinpah, who thought it a suitably shocking comedy moment. Maybe it amused him a little too much. Let's just say that some attitudes towards the female of the species and their portrayal in this film might turn some people off. There is a hint that Sappensley and Quill are in a gay relationship, but it's far from definitive. They're not exactly Winton Kid in Diamonds Are Forever. There is savage gunplay and stylized violence, and whilst it doesn't seem excessive to me, not everyone will feel the same. Whilst the bullet and body count are way short of something like The Wild Bunch, it's altogether a more intimate and confined experience with a ferocious and concentrated intensity to it. It comes perilously close to overblown cliché, but narrowly avoids it by a small margin. For some though, it might be seen as overstepping the mark. Everyone who shoots at Benny, and there are many, never hit the target, well until the end, but these tooled up marksmen are for the most part, either seriously visually challenged or palsied. There are times when the pacing seems a little off and results in the film feeling longer than it actually is. There are moments when Peckinpah does indeed seem to lose focus and meander a bit, and although these aren't pervasive or damaging issues, tightening the runtime might have added an extra bit of pep and momentum to the narrative, exercising a better grip on the attention of the less contemplative and patient viewer. Then there's the morbid and gruesome subject matter. A guy transporting a rotting head in a sack in a car through scorchingly hot terrain, and the practical issues associated with such an activity might not be an attractive proposition for some audiences to get up close and personal with. And be in no doubt, Peckinpah doesn't shy away from lingering on depictions of heat, the flies, the stench, the nausea, and the madness. Queasy stuff that might not go down all that palatably with the popcorn and hot dogs. Feel-good movie? This is not. Happy-clappy, rip-snorting funfest? It most definitely isn't. Punishing and disturbing journey into the heart of darkness that makes Apocalypse Now seem like a paddle through a Disneyland water park? It definitely is. The choice, as always, remains yours. Peckinpah never met an audience he couldn't divide. I know people who love Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia as a distinct neo-western slab of daring cinematic art, and people who loathe it as a moral indulgent exploitational dreck. You already know where I pitch my campervan, and if you've seen it, the film, not my campervan, then you'll already know where you stand. If you haven't, then expect to be either enthralled, astonished and amazed, or repulsed, alienated and mightily pissed off. Let me know how it is for you, or how it goes. I'm heading off, cutting loose. So, adios for now, amigos.